I'm Glenda Ritz, Superintendent of Public Instruction, and I'm going to call this business meeting to order on May 1, 2013. If we could take roll call, please, Becky.
Joe Blackler. Here. Jim Edwards.
Here.
Dan Ellsworth.
Present.
Sarah O'Brien. Mike Pettibone.
Present.
Neil Pickett.
Present.
David Shane.
Here.
Tony Walker.
Present.
TJ Watts.
Here.
Harry Wicker. Superintendent Ritz.
Here. If you could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. The first order of business is the approval of minutes. Neil, did you get a chance to review them?
I did,
Okay.
and I thought they looked great.
Anybody else have any changes? All those in, yeah, go ahead and do a motion. You may.
Make a motion to accept minutes as presented.
Is there a second? Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The minutes are approved. The next item of business is the statement of the chair. I would like to, I'm very pleased to introduce to you today the Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction, Danielle Shockey, and I'm going to ask her to come up and introduce herself to the board.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Board, my name is Danielle Shockey. As she mentioned, I'm joining the Department of Education after 15 years in service as a teacher administrator in Indiana schools. Most recently, those were in Lawrence Township, 7 years as elementary. Sometime after that, in the last year, I was actually in higher education at Harrison College, serving as the National Dean for Education for them. So a little bit both ends of the spectrum. Mom of 3, one of which I'm proud to say a special needs student. So I guess I come with a lot of perspective on education and passion around what we do for all students in the state of Indiana.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Danielle?
Thank you. I look forward to getting to know all of you.
Thank you very much. I want to let the board know that the NASB membership is in place, as well as when we looked at the account, we put $5,000 in there for travel expenses. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that. I also want to talk about the literacy initiative, and I think we passed out a small 2-page little item that you have with you regarding that summer initiative. We are going to embark upon a statewide literacy initiative called Who's Your Family of Readers, with a little play on the word Hoosier. We've got some logos developed. We've got a PR campaign that's going to be going on. We have 124 general program partners in 51 counties already. So we're starting to really ratchet this up, and we're going to have an actual kickoff on May 10. And we've got, like I said, we have lots of partners. We want to try to prevent that reading slide that happens over the summer months before we start school the next school year. So we're going to be kicking that off. So when you see it in the news, I hope that you will support it in your own way in your own local area. Also, I want to give a legislative update, and I asked my legislative team to prepare you a very comprehensive legislative report. It's very large, so if you want to pull that out, I don't know if we want to have too much dialogue on it. You may probably want to have time to peruse it. It does not contain the actual language, but I see that many of you are interested in legislative items, and so you've already gone online and tried to print off what you may consider to be the latest versions. So as you can see, we have a variety. I think there's like 36 or something 36 items here that are going to affect education. Some of them will affect us directly, in which we may need to actually promulgate rule. Others may affect us indirectly, where the Department of Education is simply implementing what's been provided here. So I guess if you want to ask specific questions, or you know specific bill numbers that you want to point out, you certainly can do that. Go ahead,
I
Neil.
apologize, I know this is your statement from the chair and not a, but we have got to create from this and from all of the laws that are passed once they're signed by the governor. I recognize that has to be done. We've got to create some kind of to-do list and timeline.
Oh, yes.
I mean,
Oh, yes.
there are-
Oh, yeah.
There are a number of pieces of legislation beyond,
Sure.
1427. And some of them, I guess, in particular, I hadn't even realized how quickly we have to act on 1005. I mean, we're supposed to have something in place by July 1st. Since we only have one meeting between now and July 1st, I don't even know if that's doable. I mean, that's for you and your team to determine, or how we try to attack that. But anyway, the overall point, and I guess I know you know this, so thank you, but we just have to kind of clearly stake out in all of these pieces of legislation what the state board has been assigned, the timeline for doing so, and then back to Joe's point, and Dan has made this point too, about having a strategic plan. We need to have a plan for how we're going to work through all of this. As I understand it, we've been given a number of pretty significant responsibilities, and so anyway, I just think...
Your point is taken, and Scott Reske, is he still in the room?
Yeah, he's in the back. I
Okay,
think. Yeah.
he's going to be spearheading that to make sure that we're going to have a full accounting of what needs to happen, and we're going to be putting together a timeline. Exactly what you just said, Neil, exactly.
Thank you.
I have one question, of course, on Common Core. I know a lot of schools are adopting textbooks now, and many are adopting them around Common Core. Once you get the vetting through the lawyers and whether or not they go beyond the second grade or not, will you be releasing a memo about the textbook adoptions? Because,
Curriculum material.
well, but.
Correct.
Correct. But many are still adopting, whether it's software or whatever, their focus is on Common Core. So,
Well, absolutely, that's the point. I mean, whether it's a textbook or some other form.
I'll definitely keep that in mind for sure in communications. So I have one sad item to report, and that's Mike Pettibone's retirement as superintendent from Adams Central.
He doesn't look sad.
School.
I don't think there's anything sad there.
Well, it's sad that you're going. This is his last board meeting, so there's the sad part. So we commend you for your service, Mike, not only in your school corporation, but for the state board.
Can I?
You may.
May I ask, especially before we adopt any kind of operating procedures that preclude this, I would like to make a motion that we formally recognize Mike Pettibone for his service on the State Board of Education, and that we, the department, develop some kind of certificate or recognition for him and present it to him at the appropriate time.
You actually don't need to have a motion to do
I
that.
don't- okay, good.
I'll second it.
So, and it was
Yes, we
going to be a
do.
surprise later. So,
I'm just going to take this time rather than board comments. I just want to say thank you. It's been an honor to have this privilege to be here. And I appreciate your extended friendships that we've developed, and especially my pledge class of Dan, and Jim, and David, and Joe. It's been a learning situation for me, and I appreciate that. I just want to say I have just a couple here. It says, I've admired the courage of this board to recognize that too many children in schools not performing at acceptable rates were addressed, and I think that is that's one of the things that will do that. And I appreciate those, and if I were to say the lasting thought is that as we make decisions here, my thing is, let's make them, there's so much information out there in the last 20 years that are research and educationally based that we need to continually step back and make sure that we're making those decisions in that realm and not in the realm of, political wishes, etc. I always want us to represent the purpose of education and the goodness of students. And sometimes that's hard to do, but I appreciate that. And it has been, it's been a good experience. And again, my big thing is that life is about this, it's about relationships. And I feel like I've developed some good friends on this board, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for your service. Are there board member comments and reports? Joe?
One of them, I want to say kudos to House Bill 1427 for adding parents to the Academic Standards Review Panel. I think that's an awesome addition. And giving parents the provision to have their students retested or rescored, their ISTEP tests. I think that's what's in there. I think that's a great privilege for parents. I also wondered if we had any information on the teaching assistant team's report that identified the 4 to 5 failing schools. I know that every year we usually get a report, and we haven't seen that yet. And I know from 2012, 2013 we had. To my knowledge, it was done, but we haven't seen it.
Can you elaborate on that, Joe? I'm not sure what you're speaking to.
The failing schools. Where are we on the next round of schools?
Which schools are at risk?
Are you talking about the SIG grants?
Yes,
and the?
yes.
Oh, okay, no problem, no
And
problem.
then lastly,
I think you're talking about PL 221.
yes.
Yeah, so which schools are at?
I think Tony did give us a report on that, and it seems like there were only 1 or 2 on that list.
Right, there are only
Okay.
a few. but-
I don't remember that. I looked everywhere.
So which ones are 5 years?
That's fine.
Yeah, we
I'll just-
will be doing that because we're going to be looking at, looking at the assessments at the end of this assessment period,
Okay.
yes.
And lastly, I was wondering if someone was going to NASB this May, and I hope it was BJ, you had mentioned interest.
Is it July?
Or July, yes, I'm
thought
sorry.
so. I said I'm certainly willing and
Yeah. Okay.
would, but I don't want to
No,
Beauregard.
you're a new
Be
board
good.
member, and it's a new board member conference, and I would just
Yeah, no,
encourage you
absolutely.
to
I
do
would
that.
certainly. I'd be honored.
Okay.
Okay. Good.
You can work with our office to arrange that if
Yeah,
you'd like.
absolutely.
Okay. Any more?
Yeah, I don't want to embarrass Mike, but besides my motion, I do want to say particularly personally how much I've appreciated serving with him the past 4 years. He's brought a perspective on issues that is both thoughtful and full of integrity, but also very much grounded in the practical experience he's had as a professional educator. And while we don't always agree, I think we agree much more than we disagree, and I've learned a lot from his practical perspective. The time he spends in school working with teachers, working with students, I think has always informed the debate and the discussion that this board has had. I think he's discussed issues in very good faith, and he's represented his constituencies extremely well. So he will be missed, and by both me personally and by the board, and I hope and expect that the governor will have the wisdom and good judgment to appoint someone with similar experiences and similar strength of character.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. I couldn't say it better. Wonderful person.
Ditto, and my only hesitancy was I wanted Tony to go down to the court and get a temporary restraining order against Mike retiring until we had the new set of assessments in place because he wrote so much of the last set.
Can you handle that?
Oh, yeah. There's a fee involved.
Always. Well, what's he worth? That's the question.
The next item on the agenda is...
Oh, I had comments.
Oh, so sorry.
I just wanted to say, as it relates to House Bill 1427, particularly the Common Core portion, I very much believe that was a solution without a problem. I think that the passage is going to lead to uncertainty and confusion for many schools across the state. And there's no consensus even on this panel up here as of today as to what exactly that law means. And if at a deeper level, the legislature really just wants to provide standards policy, I mean, they have the authority to take that from us. But the whole idea that somehow this board had not done a comprehensive evaluation of the Common Core standards prior to adopting them is false. All of that work has already been done. All those study sessions were done. Now, if you don't like the outcome, then you have the authority to maybe legislate that differently. But the idea that now we have a pause that explained earlier, I couldn't have it explained to me. So what does that mean? Also, I'd just like to say with regards to the I-STEP yesterday, the vendor that botched the I-STEP should have to pay back the state a portion of the money they received to administer the I-STEP. If the contract does not permit that, then the contract should be amended to have financial penalties for such an occasion as yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I think we're now ready for public general comments, and no one has signed up to make comment. So we'll head to the next agenda item, best practices, innovations in education, and student successes. I had the fortunate opportunity to attend the Shelbyville Central Schools Pre-K Outreach initiative. And we have today Mary Harper, who is the Assistant Superintendent for Shelbyville Schools, and Susan Smith, the preschool teacher at Hendricks Elementary School, to present to you a presentation on getting our young kids, and Tony, you'll appreciate this, ready to come to school. Thank you.
We try very hard, and thank you so much for letting us come today and share some of our initiatives. Before I get started, I just want to talk to you a little bit about Shelbyville Central. We have a little over 3,900 students with a poverty rate of about 58%. We have a growing Hispanic family, very supportive group of people at about 10%. Our special education population is about 16%. And probably one of the most challenging characteristics about our district is our inter-district mobility rate of over 9%. You can see the state average is about 4%. Currently, we can celebrate some of our student performance data. With the last iRead results, 93.5% of our third graders are on level. We have over a 90% graduation rate, and we're proud of that IDOE A rating. Unfortunately, we didn't always celebrate our students' performance. In 2003, we had only 57% of our third graders were on level. Just as alarming, 32% of our incoming kindergartners were on level at the beginning of the year. I was a building principal at the time of these reading initiatives, and we had just started assessing our incoming kindergartners in the summer, which we thought was a great idea. And I had a father come to me the very first day of school, and I knew he had received his child's testing information. And he said, "Mrs. Harper, how can my child be behind on the first day of kindergarten?" And I really didn't have answers for him, but that question just resonated with me. I brought it back to our school improvement team, and they just took action. So in 2007, we started a 90% reading goal committee. That just grew into a countywide action team to address early childhood education. That group just got together and planned initiatives, not just for schools, but for parents and community agencies and preschool providers. I think creating community awareness was so important, so we just branched out. I mean, we drove buses around with teachers, and we created magnets and bumper stickers and t-shirts, reading 20 minutes a day. We created a countywide definition, and that took some time, on exactly what does it mean to be ready for kindergarten. We wanted to be clearly define some information to parents, so we created a checklist And is your child ready for kindergarten? We created brochures on ways they could help their kids over the summer. We delivered baskets, which are still in the community today, in waiting rooms, laundromats, agencies, the jail, everywhere we could go that would let us. And they have signs saying, have you read with your child today? We realized that waiting until the first day of kindergarten was not going to help us prepare our little kiddos, so we knew that we had to start assessing them early. So in January, we have a huge campaign where we advertise and we get those kids registered. There was a time that we registered less than 1/3 of our students, and now we register over 2/3. And that campaign goes throughout the year to the very last day of school. We want to get all those kids identified. This last April, and Superintendent Ritz was nice enough to join us for our 7th annual Parent Fair. This fair is actually for parents of children ages 3 to 5. At this current Parent Fair, 58% of our pre-registered kindergarten students had representation. We have over 34 booths, 70 school and community members share information on how to get their kids ready for kindergarten. We give away over 250 books, and it takes 100 volunteers to make this Parent Fair a success. This is a picture of the Parent Fair this year. We had over 400 parents and guardians, and we take an opportunity to just talk to them heart to heart about what they can do to help their child be ready for kindergarten. We stress the importance of reading 20 minutes a day. We give them lots of activities and things that they can do, and we also encourage them to go to the public library and join in on our summer reading program called Dive Into Reading.
As you can see, we give each of our incoming kindergarten students a free backpack. The backpack is full of mathematics and language arts activities. Including with that activity book bag is a DVD that's created by our kindergarten teachers. It shows and it models how to use the manipulatives in the book bag, so there's carryover between what we do in the school and then what you can do at home. We knew this was meaningful. Mrs. Harper and I were working a roadblock one year, and when the parent had pulled up and they were reaching into their purse to donate to our roadblock, there was a little girl sitting in the back with her book bag going through her ABCs. So we know this was a connection to the community. We knew there was a connection to the students and the parents as well. At our parent fair, we have kindergarten teachers represented from each elementary school. They open up the book bag, and each teacher will have an activity out of that book bag, so the parents can have questions right at that moment if they need to. This also allows the teachers to be seen with the parent, and there's a little more of that connection from school to home. Our parent fair has a great diverse representation from our community. As you can see, they come every year, and we've had for 7 years, as Mrs. Harper said, and they come back every One of the best parts of our parent fair is that we have free child care. This is our Silly Safari. We had 144 students attend this child care, and sometimes when the parents are ready to go, the kids are not. We have high school students who come in and they help volunteer to do the child care, and I think it's a great activity for the high school students to reach down to the younger ones. Part of our outreach initiative is also assessing our students early. In April, we take a time throughout the week and we do an assessment on the students. So we have a better idea of where our students are coming in. We invite the parents to come back for an open house for a kindergarten family welcome, and they take a tour of the building. They see the library. Again, there was also an opportunity for the kids, the incoming kindergarten students, to come to each kindergarten classroom and learn some other additional things that can be done over the summer to help prepare the child for the school year. When we take that assessment, we look at our most at-risk students from the assessment in April, and we invite 70, 80 students to come for a 3-week program. Of that 3-week program, we also have transportation and lunches provided, which is a great initiative for a lot of parents to send their kids over their summer. We have about 93% of the students in the 2012 Jumpstart came 10 or more days throughout that 3-week period, and 64% of those Jumpstart students reached the Burgon Scale score of 80. That's what we use as part of our assessment, but not total assessment. Another part of our action team is moving, and we looked at the foundations for the young children from birth to 5, and we made a scope and sequence. We tried to make it a little bit meaningful, it's a 360-page document if you haven't had a chance to look at it. It's a little overwhelming as a teacher. So we made a scope and sequence, we built that into ours, and we did share with our community preschools so that they had another document. Leading into that, we had to have a preschool provider fair. The purpose of that was to reach out to our community preschools as well as our licensed daycare providers. We had just a nice afternoon or morning together. We shared that there are changes in the expectation for kindergarten, the Common Core standards that are coming up. As some of you will know, it seems like kindergarten is the the old first grade. The expectations setting out. So it's nice to have that opportunity to kind of sit at a round table and talk together. Again, it was also building connections between the school and the community preschool providers. We started our workshop with about a 30-minute meeting. Some of the people that were in attendance in there were not even aware of the foundations or the Common Core. We had a carousel of learning. There were teachers and community agencies that came, and there were 30 booths set up, and it was just a nice round table for them to experience and explore what we could be doing in our classroom. Make and take was very nice, and everybody got to take something home. We also had community organizations like First Steps, Health Department, the Public Library, and Hutfer Memorial Services that also were outreach for our daycare providers. At Shelbyville Central, we really know that the first day of kindergarten begins before August 1st. So we would like to thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today, and we wanted to see if you had any questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to let the board know that we introduced the Indiana Early Learning Standards, the foundation standards, at our last board meeting, and I hope to bring them before the board for approval so that we can all begin using them as we should. And I'd be most interested in seeing your scope and sequence that you have developed for your early learners, because that may save a lot of time for others to be able to use.
And we would be happy to share any of the information. We had roadblocks and hiccups along the way, but anything that we created for these outreach initiatives, we'd be happy to share with any other corporations.
For sure.
I can't help but notice the leadership you've shown here, beyond your walls. To
Thank
go out,
you.
I mean, it's just obvious and very, very impressive. So it's refreshing.
Well,
It's not surprising, but refreshing, and I just admire you're comprehensive, you've brought partners, all the things leaders do. You have an articulated goal, and way to go.
Well, we appreciate that, and the community have been so supportive, so very supportive of our
It's
initiatives.
impressive.
Thank you.
I like the county expectations.
Yes, that was kind of a challenge, but we share lots and lots of students, and it's been very beneficial. And the dialogue between our corporations is just so healthy now, just so very healthy.
Neil?
Yeah, I want to kind of echo Dan's comment, but a question, do you have a budget for this, and how do you fund it?
Well, first of all, we had to get very creative, and we wrote lots and lots of grants, and we begged a little bit. But part of it, once it started being successful, we've got a couple providers or a couple companies that support the parent fair now. Part of it is able to be built into our Title I funds, which is, very beneficial. But now that we've gone through it, it's not as expensive as you think. It takes more manpower and commitment to those families, when they're not in your schools yet, than it really are dollars to do it.
Do you happen to know, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you happen to know how many corporations throughout the state do something like this? Are you really rare in doing this, or I know you do it well, but do you know kind of?
Well, I have to just maybe, I can't say I know that answer. I would hope that more corporations would start looking to that. I think parents are hungry to prepare their kids for school, and they just don't have the resources. I can say in Shelby County, I'm pleased to say that all of them we all do roundups early, we all assess in April, we all use similar assessments, and we all have some kind of resource fair. Maybe not to this magnitude, but they're not as big, but I can definitely, every corporation in our county does one.
I ask this because I think this is, we hear every month examples of good practices, excellent practices, innovation. This strikes me as very powerful, very successful, to your point. A lot of work to do, but once you kind of get it going, it kind of develops some momentum. It'd be great to, love to see this kind of shared more widely as a model and encourage ways. I think this is always the dilemma. You know, it's a dilemma in our business, it's a dilemma anywhere. When one group or one part of a group does something well, how do you share that? How do you share that knowledge so somebody else doesn't have to start from scratch? And how do you kind of say, look, just here's some people who did it, just take some lessons from what they did. And this is the kind of thing I think we'd love to see replicated in more places.
Well, we invite anyone to our corporation. Our demographics speak to themselves. We're proud of Shelbyville, but because of our student performance data and some of the initiatives that we've been doing, we host lots of visits from schools. And, you know, if anyone asks, we're always willing to share, always.
Well, and let me piggyback on that, because the outreach, the school improvement piece that I talked about, part of what's going to be within that is the pull down of resources and supports that you might need. And so, for instance, if a school is not, you know, doing very well in the continuum to providing that communication with their young learners out in the community, then we would put right on the technology piece for all to see, actually. Here's programs happening here, that are about parent fairs and getting things going and involving community pieces, and have those immediate connections right then. And it could happen in one county, but let's just pretend that you were the only school district doing it in your county. But then all of a sudden, the outreach coordinator is like, oh, you should see what's happening over in Shelbyville. You know, I think we could duplicate that over here. So I think the sharing part is the most important. And I'm actually going to share it in the next superintendent's update, but I also want to put things like this on Facebook, you know, so that people can see and know about it on the Department of Education's website.
Okay.
Well done.
Thank you. I just have to say, there's nothing scarier for a parent than the first day of kindergarten. Not the student, for the parent, and I've seen a lot less tears over the course of the years. Thank you so much for having us.
Great work on this. This is fantastic. One question: are you able to offer full-day kindergarten for all the families that want their child?
You know, actually, I have to compliment our superintendent, Dr. David Adams. He got very creative with some budgeting several years ago. We felt it was critical. I think I was doing a little bit of this in both ears, and we have provided all-day kindergarten for several years at no cost to parents.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much. I also had the opportunity to visit the Ben Davis Preschool. Oh my goodness. If you ever have an opportunity to do that, I mean, just go make an appointment to go visit the Ben Davis Preschool facility. I was blown away. They have, you know, like almost 400 students that go to their preschool. The Department of Education is going to start collecting data and gathering information regarding our early learning programming that's happening, talk about how they're funding it, and how they're supporting their efforts, and how we can share those good practices around the state of Indiana. So anyhow, Ben Davis, I recently visited their preschool. We are ready for discussion, and I know you all received information regarding the turnaround academies. And I will say again, at this board's urging, we will be creating a template going forward after the school year, so that we can have a more concise data structure and information sharing that is more common, so that we can see the schools from a common point of view. But do any of the board members, excuse me, have any comments regarding any of the Turnaround Academy items that we may? I think most of the vendors are here in the audience, if you might have any questions.
I got one, I guess. I was
All right,
kind
Neil?
of curious to see that, or interested to see that in the Emma Donovan report, they mention moving toward a focus in the future on making Emma Donovan a model urban school, urban middle school for the state of Indiana. And I was just, I hadn't seen that before, and I was kind of a little curious about what prompted, whether it's a shift in focus, whether it's just confirmation of what was, where they were heading anyway, and more importantly, what it means, because it doesn't really mean an awful lot just as a sentence. So if there is anyone here to comment. If not, maybe we could follow up.
Is there anyone here from the Emadonna vendor support? Thank you. Thank you.
Byron Ernest, I'm the principal at Emmerich Manual. Dr. Terry was not able to attend this morning, but I've got her data and can speak to that. I think with that comment, what I would say is the culture there has changed so much, and you saw the activities that they have their students involved in, as well as the academic portion that goes along with that, parent involvement. I think when she says, to speak for her, I think when she says to make that the ideal urban school environment, I think what she's talking about is that balanced environment of the student achievement, high student achievement, our guaranteed viable curriculum that we have for our students, the activities that go around with that go to the citizenships, the leadership, and those types of skills that we want our students to have. And then the third component to that is the parent involvement and the community involvement, because we have seen a huge increase in parent involvement, community involvement in all three schools as we've worked through that. So I think that's where she's going with that comment in there.
Makes a lot of sense, and it would be helpful, though, for her or for someone else to kind of articulate a little more clearly and specifically what is meant by that, because especially if you're going to hold yourselves to that kind of goal, which I think is admirable, and I think, interestingly, is very consistent with Dr. Ritz's emphasis on the entire school, and not just, both the academic performance and the culture of the school and the engagement of the school. It would be useful to have that spelled out in a bit more specificity.
Absolutely, and I will pass that along.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're ready for, are you ready? Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a concern regarding Roosevelt. I noticed on the report that they're indicating that they have had a combined 1,453 in-school and out-of-school suspensions so far this year, with, I think, a population of only around 694 students. That's a problem in my mind. Is anyone here from Edison? Or, no?
Yes,
Oh, Vanessa, how are you? I was just wondering, what are you all attributing the high level of suspensions?
We're working on establishing a strong culture in the school that is really clearly defining where students need to be and what behavioral expectations are in all locations of the building. And so we have been rebuilding the culture around student engagement, around what appropriate behavior expectations look like, and that would attribute to our suspension rate. We are ready to open up an alternative program. Our first placement will be on May 13th, so that will help assist in the options for students. For those students who are consistently running into behavioral concerns, what their options are for keeping them in school, keeping them in an alternative education program.
Okay, great. That's what I was going to ask you. You have an alternative program. Oh, thank you very
Yes.
much.
Thank you.
One last question, Dr. Ritz. Please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that that John Marshall this year has been working, of course, with Voyager, and that at some point the board has to make a decision about whether the progress made at John Marshall is sufficient to allow that to continue, or for other options to be considered. And I know obviously we have to wait for ISTEP testing, but I'd kind of like, I'd ask for you and your team again to give some thought to how you want to construct that conversation. What are the, what are the criteria we are going to use? And we need to do that probably again pretty quickly, because if you're going to if there is any intention to change gears, and I'm not suggesting there should be or will be, but if there is, we have to know, I assume, before the school year starts. Or so I just would like to have a better sense, and maybe even between meetings, if you wouldn't mind just giving us an idea of how you would like to go about, or how you see that decision process going over the next couple of months. I would be very grateful to you.
Duly noted.
Thank
No
you.
problem. I'd also like to make a comment regarding Roosevelt, because you were talking about the suspensions. And I do appreciate Edison actually breaking out the in-school suspensions as opposed to the out-of-school suspensions, because not all of these reports do that. So that is valuable, because the in-school suspensions, obviously, in my personal opinion, are much more productive because you actually have the child in school to get some work completed, whereas out-of-school suspensions, typically that doesn't happen at all. Thank you. Next, we have an update on the Memorandum of Understanding for Mayor's oversight of the turnaround school operators in IPS. And Michelle McGowan, I think you're going to give that oral report.
Yes, so we have had multiple meetings and passing of the Memorandum of Understanding between the department and the mayor's office. We just had a meeting yesterday afternoon, and we anticipate that that will be finalized by Friday of this week. Do we have any?
Does this board have to take action on that?
No.
No, we had just had some requests for an update as to how that process was moving forward.
I would like to see the document though when it's completed.
When it's finalized, we would be happy to share it with the board.
You know, I don't know when this should come up, but given the detailed timelines and some of the material, I think when I look at some of the things we're supposed to do for July 1st in the legislation, looking at these updates, we may just want to have a full agenda next meeting. I don't know that we'll be in June, and there's a number of things we have to do and should be looking at updates on various situations.
Dan,
I don't know.
we can have that exact conversation under board operations at the end of our agenda.
It's just, yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
I'll do note that.
It's just it seems like we keep saying we have a lot on our docket, and it's going to be difficult to get to it all without more time. All these turnaround reports and various things alone are
For
very
the
important.
next item, I'm actually going to do the presentation. So I'm going to, you have two documents at your table. One is the actual reading plan rule, which you have already indicated some changes to. And this rule is ready to proceed through promulgation. And I would like to conceptually share with you today some language that I would like to add to this rule or change to this rule. But by design, I have not written any language. There is no language that I'm proposing to you today, because I really do want your input on the conceptual ideas before I go forth and write language. I don't intend to bring a rule to you that has language in it that you don't feel should go forward. There's a myriad of ways in which rules are changed and language is designed throughout the promulgation process. But I do want to share conceptually, as an educator and a person who's been involved in literacy my entire life in my profession, share with you some changes conceptually that I'd like to see in the rule before we promulgate this. So with that, I have a PowerPoint, and I've given you a copy of that as well.
Does this require like most rules, public hearings?
Oh, yes, this will be a public hearing later. We are only,
This is just the first part.
yeah, we're only in the very beginning stages. Becky, what's the actual term that they've approved so far?
They've approved a proposed language that would be published prior to a public hearing.
Gotcha.
Right.
This has not yet been published.
No, we've not started the process, and so I want to propose.
That's what I thought, but I
some-
just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, I want to propose some further changes, but I want to conceptually share them with you. And John Wolf from one of our literacy specialists I know is in the audience, and so as we go, if you've got some questions, I did work with my team to develop this PowerPoint, and we have worked within the iRead 3 promulgation rule for a couple of years here now, and so what you're going to see is a vision of conceptual framework for reading. See if I cannot trip on this time. As you can see, the current title is called Reading Plan. I want it to be very clear to the educators in Indiana that it is a reading instruction and intervention plan, that we are very serious about making sure that the components that are going to be regarding instruction and intervention are the focus of this plan. What I've provided for you is a purpose for the suggested revisions, and then I'm going to go through the rule, which is why I've been giving you a copy of the rule, but I actually prepared an overview of each section so that we can actually have dialogue. And please feel free anytime during the presentation to ask me questions, because we are in a discussion mode. Purpose for suggested revisions. I am going to read these aloud to you. I know you can read, but I want to emphasize some things. Students should demonstrate reading progress at each grade and be proficient by grade 3. I actually want to make sure that along the way, and kind of goes with Tony's comments, I need those young readers. I need to know what they're capable of, and I need to have that kind of progress at the state level to know that we're going to have proficiency by grade 3 and what supports we need to be putting in place. Accountability for reading instruction should be at every elementary grade level. Right now, the iRead 3 is holding third graders accountable. I want to hold every grade level accountable. IDOE needs to collect reading data that shows reading growth within a school year to provide supports and inform school improvement. And there's that word, school improvement, again. Reading will be an area that we're going to focus on and look at through the school improvement process. And what does it look like in your school to have a quality reading program? And you need to be sure that you've got that. And of course, this rule sets the guidelines for that to be in place. You'll see the words again, growth. I am interested in knowing how a student grows from the beginning of the year to the end of the school year. Growth data helps drive instruction for reading improvement. If we don't have growth, if we can't see it, we don't know if things are working in our implementation of instruction and our implementation of intervention. Now, the last point is a new concept. Collecting state reading data allows for data to follow the child. So let's say that we have actual reading growth information for the students in Indiana, K-5. When a child goes from one school district to another school district, that school district should be able to pull up reading information on the child they've just received in their district. So literally, if the state collects the reading data, everybody has access to that when students' mobility starts to kick in. And you heard Shelbyville talk about the mobility even within their own district. Mobility is a huge issue, and we want to be sure that we can have good, strong reading data instead of waiting for the schools to be able to send information, or they might have done a reading assessment that's different than the one that's done in their district, and they can't interpret it, and they don't know what the cutoffs mean. There's all kinds of reading information going on out there, but it's not all synchronized. So getting into the rule, 3.1, and I gave it to you so that you can actually see it as well as my conceptual pieces. I'm suggesting a title change, and that's all that's on that slide. On the next slide, Section 1 deals with the definitions of iRead 3, and you have proposed language also by the board to add a definition of retention. I'd actually like you to consider reframing iRead proficiency exams to be a growth model test instead. I will tell you that our contract with CTB regarding iRead 3 expires this summer. So it's a good opportunity for us to look at a different type of assessment system perhaps vendor to actually proceed with that. I believe that this board had already gone beyond grade 3 in wanting to have involvement with reading plan. So I am proposing that we have a growth model assessment in grades K through 5 that is given at the beginning of the year, the end of the school year, with an option for schools to assess students below level in the middle of the year so they can see if their strategies and their instructional practices are actually helping students to improve their reading. I'd like you to reconsider the need to define retention or redefine it to reflect local decision and not a requirement. I actually want to put the accountability section through instruction, intervention, and most importantly, in school improvement. I think when we have that on the ground, look at school improvement and where schools are with reading, that's where we're going to make the big effect and be able to have accountability. I have suggested no enhancements to any other definitions. On the next slide, applicability. The actual schools required to do this, I'm suggesting no enhancements to that language. And on the next screen, under the components, we've got the reading leadership team and the measurable achievement goals for each grade level and reading instruction per section 4. I'm suggesting no enhancements. Section 3 actually speaks to the components of the plan. Details of how the school will use formative and summative assessments for students you have expanded beyond K2. And so that is I'm in agreement with that totally, that we need to have a total elementary approach to this. On the right-hand side, I would like you to consider flexibility of how the school will measure. I've stated there that measurement of progress can take place in many forms, and our professionals in our classrooms really do know how to do that in a variety of ways. We don't need to limit them to formative and summative assessments, which really equates with the word test. Also, intervention, no enhancements suggested, and ISTEP and IMAS students would take iRead 3. They would also take the growth model assessment. In fact, the growth model assessment will give us much more information regarding students that are poor performers or perhaps might be special education students, because we'll actually get to see their reading level as opposed to knowing they just didn't pass the iRead 3 test. Yes, go as I go, yes.
On the section of reading plan components, that's where we are. When you say consider flexibility of how the school will measure.
Right, measure performance, whether not limited to just formative and summative assessments. That's over on the left-hand side. That's all that's in the language right now.
Okay, so this could be another method beyond the test that we give in March or April on the iRead 3 test?
Well, actually, this part of the plan is directing the school to have some type of measurement to be sure that they are that they are meeting the components of the reading and kids are improving. I'm asking for a little bit of flexibility there. Yes, we can give tests, but there's also other ways to measure progress for students. So I'm just asking for some flexibility.
Okay, is this flexibility in addition to or
Sure.
in replace of the iRead 3 test?
I am asking that we move from a pass-fail iRead exam to a growth model measure,
Okay,
beginning of the year, end of the year.
Is that what this says?
It said that on a slide before. Yeah, just this previous slide, the one right on page 2 that you have, the bottom. You may, Joe.
On the growth model test comment, is that, you're recommending and suggesting in lieu of or the retention? Let me just share my concern about that. We're going to great extremes so kids show up prepared, by the 3rd grade. We're going, in the pre-K presentation we just had in kindergarten, what I'm seeing happening in many corporations is less than half of the students are passing the ELA side of their ISTEP, whatever test it is. There will be a high-stakes test. And I've seen it happen for 12 to 15, 16, 17 years, and yet those students are promoted. So they're almost like the predictors for the dropout. So I'm deeply concerned that we are moving away from the retention issue. It's not meant as punitive, it's meant to help that child. Because what ends up happening is the snowball effect.
Well, as you can see on the next slide, I actually am speaking to that point, that very point, Joe. we currently have in place, if the child did not pass IREAD 3, that the school has the option for retention. Okay? We simply want the student to retake the test. And so we have some students who are going on to 4th grade, and we have some students who are staying in 3rd grade. Either way, they're taking the IREAD 3 later. I'm not necessarily suggesting that that be different. What I am suggesting is, and I've quoted the law right here on this slide, it says retention should be a last resort at the discretion of the school in consultation with the parent. That is where I think it should stay. And the state of Indiana, whereby we may want to give them the IREAD 3 test the next year, I think it's a school decision as to whether they actually do that, and I think we should be explicit in that in the rule, saying that it is up to the local as to whether they're doing the actual retention.
But shouldn't we learn from history that that hasn't been happening? That's my issue.
And that may be true, but remember, I'm looking for accountability
Right.
at every grade level.
Right.
So, we're going to be tracking and monitoring progress at every grade level. So hopefully we're going to be putting in interventions because that's going to be expected. And the school improvement process will expect it as well.
When you say in consultation with the parent, does that mean the parent has to approve it as well?
No, it never has been.
Okay.
Never.
I thought
Correct.
retention the parent had to sign off on. That's not the case?
Well, I think that differs from school district to school district.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything in law that has a description of that.
Can I ask, how many students have been retained under IREAD?
You know what? I don't know the answer to that question, but John, do you?
Was it approximately 3,000 for the whole state? When you're thinking about 85,000 students taking the assessment, it was approximately 3,000.
And they were formally retained?
Well, and the major piece about it is, though, we don't know if it was
Yeah, we don't know.
read only, or
Right.
if it could have been, another
It
situation.
was also after taking it the second time?
No, we have about 3,000 students that are on what we call the state retention list, that we know they need to take the IREAD 3 test the next year. But what we don't know is if those students were actually moved on to 4th, or if they stayed in 3rd. Or do we know that? I don't think we do. Yeah, that's what we don't know, because we didn't collect that type of data from the local level as to whether the child was really retained. But we do have a list of students who did not pass the IREAD 3 test after the second attempt, and they will take the IREAD 3 the next year.
So it's not a huge number of students. I mean, 3,000 out of 85,000 is not a...
But that's the amount, yeah.
Do we have any way to know how the current pressures have influenced the success of students getting to reading in grade 3?
Are you talking about
You're
just the mere fact that we're giving an assessment?
Yeah, you're proposing to soften an awful lot of stuff here. I'm just curious whether we had any data to show whether the hardening of it, the forcing of possibility of retention has caused parents and students and teachers and schools to do a better job getting kids to the 3rd grade reading.
I don't know that I'd be able to ascertain that.
What do the numbers show? What's happened in the last few years?
Yeah, we didn't.
Well, we won't know.
We didn't have a failure.
We only have 1 year worth of data.
But I would concur. I think across the state, probably the most involved parents in the state of Indiana are 3rd grade parents. Because I think they have some skin in the game finally, and I think the keeping some of that is
I
important.
think what Glenda is saying is how do we get skin in the game in K-1 too?
Oh, absolutely. And I agree
Yes.
100%.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to get skin in the game at every grade level.
Yeah.
On the next slide, going on with reading components, we have to have professional development for teachers. I recommend no enhancements to that language. A monitoring plan to evaluate implementation of reading, and that is certainly needed, and no enhancements. I would like you to consider an addition, though, right in this section, a component to the plan that schools would actually need to implement programs to promote family involvement with the child's reading. Research does show, and you heard Shelbyville talk about this morning, that 20 minutes outside of the school day, 5 days a week, really increases the rate of improvement in reading. And so family involvement in our literacy kickoff we're getting ready to do is just extremely important. And so I would want to urge schools to have some type of promotion of family reading programs within their system. Section 4 on the next slide speaks to the 90 minutes and research-based core reading programs. I suggest no enhancements to the research-based reading programs. They are needed. In fact, the Department of Education has really honed in on that, and the core reading programs that we have recommended are the reading programs that are being in use. Also, you'll see some comments about the uninterrupted. I would like to propose that we take out the word uninterrupted 90-minute block because it is causing many elementaries to teach in segregated subject matters like a secondary piece. So now we have reading, now we have writing, now we have math, now we have science and social studies, and in the younger grades they integrate so much of what they do. But you will never hear me say there should not be protected 90 minutes of time, because that's a must. So I want to remove the word uninterrupted, but keep the 90 minutes so that it's very clear that we are protecting this time. It does need to be devoted to reading, but you can integrate some other your subject matter pieces within that and make sure that that's going to be a holistic approach. I also put down there that I think we need clarification that interventions, when you actually put in an intervention piece for a student for reading, that should happen outside of that 90 minutes, not within it. So a student who needs extra reading support should get just that, extra reading support. And I think that what was happening in many of our schools before we began this process of reading plans is that it happened within, and maybe even they weren't even doing 90 minutes, but it was happening within that framework. So really a student wasn't getting extra work with that. So I would like to propose that as well.
So we might add the word integrated, if it's not already in there.
We could.
And maybe add the word avoid pullout. Because,
Okay.
I mean, I'm just making a suggestion because
Sure.
I've always hated the pull, avoid the pulling out during the essential part.
Okay.
So just a thought.
All right, thank you. On the next slide, now we're into instruction. Now, this is going to be a concept that really the Department of Education is taking care of. So here's where I want to talk to you about real accountability here. Consider removing exemptions, actually, because we're now putting in place, I'd like to put in place, real methodologies for making sure this happens all the time. So schools can achieve higher accountability through the school improvement process, the protected 90 minutes of instruction, and through the DOE recommendations on the use of research core-based reading programs that all schools should use. So here's my main point. I don't think anyone should be exempted from having a good quality program. And when you have growth model measures in place, not only will we know where students' real performance levels are, but we will also know the percentage of students who are at or above reading level. So we will know that instantly for accountability purposes, and the DOE is committed to making sure that these exemptions really are not exemptions, and they're just going to be commonplace all the time, and as they should be. Then section 5 is on intervention. And before I begin this point, I just want to say that because I'm a special education teacher and a general education teacher and library science, that the RTI process, which you may or may not be familiar with, response to instruction, that's a process before a student can be identified as special education. We must have put intervention pieces in place to improve the learning, to actually have evidence that this student needs to have special services. And so this process, it's very within this reading framework that we have here, be aligned, because many of the students who have reading who have response to instruction plans are the very same students that are performing below level in reading. And so in order to not duplicate all of our processes and all the paperwork and the redundancy in notifying parents, I'm suggesting that we align that process. And it really should be one process that happens. Parent notification that your child's not performing well, even talking about the possibility of retention actually needs to be right on the form, and actually dealing with that in that type of manner. And what I'm really suggesting with our growth model is that there's ongoing intervention all the time. We're not going to wait till the end of the school year with a pass-fail test and then say, now let's go remediate. We're actually going to provide interventions the whole time. And you may say, well, aren't schools doing that now? What I would hope so. But they don't all have a common assessment. And having that common assessment helps the Department of Education get the proper supports to them when they need it for what they need it. Yes, go ahead, Neil.
I don't understand that slide.
Okay.
Is the bottom line that you're not suggesting any change in the rule language?
I'm not suggesting any enhancements, but I'm suggesting total alignment with RTI. And I'm not sure we need any language changes there. You're correct.
Okay.
The next slide deals with the components, the next slide deals with intervention. Again, that's a little bit more, this is the actual portion, Neil, where I would suggest that we write some language to actually align it with the response to instruction. And we do mention that in the reading rule, so I just think that we need to be explicit about that and actually make that happen. And this is where I also say, consider that there be a notice to parents that the student may be retained. That would get that retention piece in there. That would alert the parents that there's a concern, and that could be a possibility. The intervention goes on to the next slide, and I'm suggesting no changes. All of those intervention pieces are appropriate.
The one issue that probably gets in the way of parent involvement is you're asking on one hand for them to read after school for 20 minutes. I think that's reasonable, but a lot of the parents, the at-risk kids don't have that ability. And then on the other hand, we're expecting the kids, we're expecting the parents to all of a sudden find out that their kids could be retained and are having a problem. When does that happen? Because in my experience as a parent, as a former school board member, as a volunteer in schools, is that usually happens after the first semester. And it's really, as a parent or a grandparent, it's almost like a shock.
And when you have reading growth information, you actually will be able to have that dialogue earlier because you'll already know the progress of the child. Okay. So reading growth information is very valuable even for the act of retention. You're correct, because you don't want surprises. Right. You want to have constant information to the parents and have dialogue with the family. A little note, when I talk about the 20 minutes outside of the school day, it may not necessarily be at their home. Your family of readers could be a variety of people. It might be, a mentor. It might be somebody from your church at a church program. It might be after-school program with an adult at the school. So you can have it in a variety of ways.
I understand. There's a group I was involved in that did that for six to 8 months, and we tried to track gains academically, and it just didn't happen because there was not that at-home reinforcement.
Continuity.
So just something, I know you can't mandate anything to parents, but that and many do that. They do the reading naturally, but many have the 4th and 6th grade level reading themselves, so it kind of it's a catch-22 for those kids.
And that parent piece is on the next slide, and you already have it in the language. It talks about parent workshops, guided home reading program. It's got some very specific things in there, and I'm not suggesting any enhancement language to that because you really have those components all in place. That if a student is not doing well, these are the things that need to be considered. Go ahead, Neil.
I don't quite get this. You're talking about the ability under this new system with a growth model to intervene during the course of the year, but the growth model that you're talking about is at the beginning and the end of the year.
And in the middle.
And you've kind of raised objections to formative assessments, which do the same thing, which test the kid during the course of the year to find out how they're doing. So I don't understand why the proposed system's better than the one that exists now, and I don't get the significance of the changes or how they enable you to intervene more effectively during the course of the year than you can do now. I mean, it's really up to the school and the teacher to identify kids. I mean, what's a teacher doing if they're not kind of working with the kid during the course of the year to identify if they're having problems in certain areas reading and working to correct those deficiencies? I mean, that's what teaching's about.
Your point is well taken, and if I could, Laura, if I could get you to go back to the second slide. Because Neil, your point's right on, and I want to be sure everybody understands my purpose, okay? In wanting to have a growth model assessment. Slide 2. There you go, thank you. There's several pieces on here that talk about having data at every grade level, at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, and optional in the middle for students who are below level to inform our instruction. Neil, that's happening in different ways at different schools with different kinds of assessments and different pieces that are going on. What we don't have in place is a uniform way to progress in the state of Indiana. And that's why I have my personal confusion with the turnaround academies. We do not have any unified way of looking at improvement in our turnaround academies for the subject matter of reading. And that's what most of them are focusing on, because they know literacy is one of the main areas that they must focus on. And so the state of Indiana has to have a good growth model piece in place to actually see improvement in all of our schools down to the individual student, so that we can have that data follow the child no matter where they attend in Indiana school, and that those assessments will probably take the place, Neil, of many assessments that local school districts are spending money on now. And that's a good thing, to not duplicate services, but provide the really good diagnostic reading information that all educators and parents, and quite frankly the students, need to know about themselves and their reading. So the purpose of this is to really track reading data, because reading actually shows improvement across all subject matters, because good readers have to be in place in order to improve your schools. I can't say it any clearer that reading is the primary focus, and in Indiana, you asked me today, I can give you no data. There's zero. There's no data except for I Read 3 that tells us how kids are reading in the state of Indiana. And we need to have that even in the secondary levels. I'm proposing that we have growth models. We do it in the elementary in place of a pass-fail test.
But I would say that the ISTEP,
Well, I'm not talking about ISTEP.
I know, but it is data that shows 39% are passing ELA in certain corporations.
But it does not disaggregate out reading specifically.
Well, it's supposed to provide each teacher and each parent with that piece of paper that says your child is having a difficulty in reading comprehensive, and the issue is no one's using it.
Well, we also don't have any growth information. It's a pass-fail. We don't know where kids are performing.
Right.
And that's very important, because we always want to accelerate students.
I understand that, but there have been, ever since at least 15 years, there have been, through the high stakes test, a parent piece on the test that goes to the parent, and a piece of a document that goes to the teacher that outlines, okay, this child needs help in phonemic awareness, or whatever the case may be. And so there have been individualized opportunities, but they haven't been used. So how are we going to be sure?
Well, and I'm not suggesting that we're not going to have a summative assessment like ISTEP, because we are. I'm suggesting that we need to have clear data information regarding reading performance at every grade level in the elementary level. And the best way to do that is through growth measures, so we know where the students are performing and improving.
And later we'll know what those growth measures are.
Oh, I haven't even begun to
Okay.
look at assessments. Really, this is a dialogue between you and I to talk about what possible changes to the language for promulgation of iRead 3. And so on the last slide, second to last slide, I believe, it talks about implementation. This was some language that you added. I'm suggesting that when we go to growth model accountability and we're accountable at every grade level, that this language really will not be needed, to be honest, because we'll have it all the way through, and so exemptions and requirement pieces like that will not be needed at all. So on the last slide,
I'm very uncomfortable with not having a reading plan, just for the record.
oh no, we are having a reading
Well,
plan.
but that it isn't part of the accountability for implementation as their school improvement. It says requires, as it current stands, requires a plan. And then on the other side, it says consider putting accountability for implementation with the school improvement. It doesn't really.
I guess what I'm saying is every school will have it and will be tracking that through the school improvement process, like period. So there would be no need.
I like that point, because right now we're submitting a improvement plan, we're also submitting a reading plan.
Right.
Let's submit the reading plan with the school improvement plan. I think that's what you're saying, isn't
Right.
it? Yeah.
Students should demonstrate reading proficiency by grade 3. That is a must. You will never hear me deviate from that. We should be learning to read and reading to learn. And the last one is my little quote, and I don't even know who first said it. I think it was anonymous. But a reader is not a person who can read. It's a person who does read. We need to be about the business not only teaching students to read, but making sure that they are lifelong readers, and that's happening. So what my plan is to actually, we've been taking notes here today on your comments, but I'm going to welcome your comments even after this. I'm going to propose some language to you, and I'll send it out to you, and I want to hear your comments, because when I come back in June, I want it to be what you want it to go forward with. So I want to tweak it and work with it, and I welcome your comments regarding the reading instruction and intervention plan that I presented a conceptual framework for today.
So, a little slow. I'll certainly
Never, Neil.
accept that. But how on earth do you demonstrate reading proficiency with only a growth model? If the growth isn't to proficiency, then how do you do it? I mean, if you're measuring growth, you're measuring improvement. You're not measuring reaching a standard. And if you don't measure reaching a standard, how do you establish proficiency?
Let me give you an example. There are two forms of tests. One type of test, which I consider to be what I call pass-fail. Everybody takes the same questions at the same time and you get a score. And there's a ceiling to that. There's a bottom and a top, and you take it at a grade level. So you really don't get to see in 5th grade that students are 8th grade readers. So then there's the other type of test. It's an actual test that's a growth measure in which the students, all students, they have banks of questions. And if you get a question wrong in comprehension piece, then it gives you an easier question and it levels you out until it tells us, here is your level of performance. But at the same time, it also tells us that they are at grade level or above. So it gives us both pieces of information simultaneously. The growth piece is important for us as educators. The accountability achievement level is very important to members of the board, knowing that kids are performing at or above grade level. So it gives both pieces of information. And quite frankly, Neil, I would never give a test. I don't want to propose any test that doesn't do that. So we would be making sure that the assessment would give two pieces of information, because both are vital to knowing if kids are achieving and if kids are showing growth, and to actually let us know the actual performance of the students' level of reading. You need to know in 5th grade that you've got 8th grade readers and 2nd grade readers and 5th grade readers, so you can get the proper materials to the kids and improve their reading. So I would never propose anything that does not do both. You are correct on needing that benchmark.
Let me suggest that the language then be extremely clear in that regard.
Okay. Duly noted.
Clear not only as to the test achieving both growth and proficiency, but that the retention issues attach only, or do not attach unless the student demonstrates proficiency. That growth below proficiency is an inadequate response in the third grade.
Correct.
The student has not achieved what we need them to achieve,
Correct.
and we will intervene. And
Correct.
retention will be part of intervention.
Yes, Tony?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think almost everything you're proposing here with the rule. Except I don't really see where it has to be either or. I see it more as a supplement to the iRead3 test. Is there a reason why you couldn't have both, what you're proposing here and keeping iRead3 in place?
Well, the assessment that I was trying to explain to Neil, actually will give us that information. There won't be a need. It will tell us the achievement level as well. So you really won't need it. It would just be a duplication of tests to show that they're reading at grade level, because the iRead3 test is at third grade. And I'm proposing a test that's going to show both. It will show us that they're reading at level and above, and it will also show us exactly their level of reading. So it would be duplication.
Are you proposing some kind of test that exists now or has to be created?
There are several vendors that have growth model assessments in reading that give us good diagnostic information, that give both information. But I have not explored all the options. I'm in the beginning phases of talking with you regarding, conceptual.
You could argue that would be extremely important to know before you promulgated a rule requiring one thing or another, to know whether it's, to know whether the supply of tests, or that the kind of test that you're proposing actually can be implemented, has been implemented, and does work the way it's supposed to work.
Oh, I know at least that much, but I haven't actually determined, which test we might use or which vendor we might go with.
Are there other states using this model?
Oh, there are states who actually have separated out their reading and their language arts and their math, even in their summative piece. I could do some research on that to see if we have states that are using pure growth models. I do know that as part of Common Core assessments, the other consortium, Smarter Balance, to talk about it in a broad perspective, is looking at a growth measure test that also shows achievement. So there's plenty of work out there with growth tests.
Do you know of a situation out there in education where classroom teachers and principals aren't assessing growth as they go through kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade? And there's a lot of different ways to do it. One is you can sit with the child a while and look at some things, but there's all sorts of instruments out there being used. Professionals use different types, et cetera. Do you think there are schools that do not measure children's growth in these early years?
No, what I'm saying is that the state of Indiana cannot help inform school improvement in a valuable way without reading information. And that much of the reading...
You're saying some schools don't have it? Or do you
I'm
want
saying it
everybody to have
varies. It
one?
varies for what they can afford, what they can put in place. Are they just using textbook assessments? Are they actually having little tests that they're putting in growth measures?
So you
There's
wanna take
all
us to
kinds of things going on.
One best, what would you would
Yes,
propose?
I wanna
One
have
best
input.
system, and everybody has one.
So that we have statewide data that can follow the child, and that we can provide the supports that are needed, and we can share information about what's good and what's happening. If we don't have true good reading information, I will contend that school improvement cannot happen as it needs to happen until we really have a handle on the literacy issue. And that's why I passed out that NAEP testing information to
So you want one instrument, one platform, common data.
Yes, and then schools hopefully won't have to duplicate, Dan, some of those efforts that they're doing and spend dollars too. If we have a good assessment, they won't have to put in place those other assessments.
So the test you're talking about would be administered at first and second grade as well?
Yeah, actually K-5. I propose K-5, correct.
And right now, iRead is only third grade, right?
It is.
So why couldn't you have first, second, fourth, fifth?
You mean just putting in more pass-fail tests?
I'm saying keep iRead for the third grade, but use these other assessments in K, first, second, fourth, fifth.
I'll just state again, I think that would be a duplication because at grade 3, you would also want to have growth. In fact, I thought it was the wish of the board to go beyond grade 3 and really have plans for your elementary. You eliminated the K2 kind of piece in here and put students. So that's what I thought we were headed
The only
towards.
test you're talking about
Is
for
K5.
K, first, second,
Third and
fourth,
fourth and 5.
fourth, and fifth.
Yes, K5.
No, what I'm saying is all except for third. Maintain iRead at third as a different type.
No, I'm suggesting a different
No, I know
assessment.
what you're suggesting. I'm
Yes.
asking a question.
Oh, okay.
Why wouldn't that work?
Because then we would have a year where we couldn't see growth. And we don't ever want to have that. It is measuring the same thing. Well, no, iRead 3 is only measuring, it's a grade level test. It's only measuring that a student is reading at third grade level or they're not.
So
It
it's
doesn't tell us
measuring-
where they are performing.
So then it's measuring something different.
Correct. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We'll go on to the next item on our agenda. We are ready for the consent agenda, and we will take a motion for the consent agenda as a whole. So do I hear a motion for the consent agenda? Second?
Second.
All those in favor say...
Excuse me.
So sorry, discussion?
Yes, I just want to register again my concern about the board operational procedures. I'm going to vote no on the consent agenda because I am disappointed that my concerns about the operational procedures were not accommodated, but I understand why they were not, but I just want to make it clear that that's why I'm voting no on the consent agenda.
Okay.
Point of order, we should remove the consent agenda.
Well, it's already been removed once, and the governor's office and my office did meet and review, and so the two offices have agreed to the operational procedures, and so they're on the consent agenda.
For the board. Now, the governor's office isn't here voting, so if it's not a consensus among the board members, then it probably shouldn't be on the consent agenda.
Tony and Neil, if we were to pass this and then put back on the agenda your specific concerns, Neil, which I don't take lightly, but we could talk. So what if we got some procedures established and we're willing to come back to that? Could we do the specifics? I mean, you're making a good point.
I think we would have to table it again, and the two offices
No,
get together.
Let's pass it all and then come
Which
back
we've
and talk
already
about
done.
the specifics.
And I'm, well,
Is that a way to go that's acceptable to Neil?
Yep.
Because I don't want to drop your concern,
That's
but we
fine.
could bring back the specifics then later.
So I hear a motion. Who's making, you made a motion, Tony, I think.
I made a motion, Tony seconded.
Yes, and so we're in discussion.
well, yeah, I'm withdrawing my second at this point. Just for the sole purpose that there's not consent for
So
a
do I
particular
have
item
a,
on the consent agenda.
so I,
I still have a motion.
I would second the motion, and I would say that I think establishing procedures are important, and I agree with Neil that there needs to be something in place. But I think everything that we do is amendable. I think it's something that you can address later, but I think establishing them now is important.
so we have a motion, we have a second,
I'd like to confirm
and
that
discussion.
we could amend it at literally the next meeting.
Yes.
Well, let's just table it. It's that simple. Right?
Right.
Do it the next meeting. Move the table.
Well, let's see how the vote goes. So all those in favor of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Let's see, I need a roll call. No, we don't usually on consent, because it's the whole thing, but why don't we raise hands, because we do need to know how many are voting.
This is procedurally problematic.
What is the motion?
To approve the consent agenda.
I think Neil had concern with, it was at the 10-day, Neil, I don't want to speak for you.
Yeah.
And I agree with that.
And I do too.
I think there needs to be some exception for, we just did it last month. We had to do something on the floor, but I think establishing procedures are important, and the fact that we can amend them at any point kind of solves any issue that we would have.
And I'm fine with that.
So there's been a motion and a second. All those in favor of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
And raise your hand, I guess, so we know. Okay. All those opposed? Okay. Motion passes. On to new business.
In light of that discussion,
What do you mean?
in light of, well, the reason, in light of that, then how do we put could I just have some assurance that the 10-day rule is the specific concern? Come back, can we amend that, have a discussion about amending that next meeting?
Well, we don't need to actually do any of that. We'll just take it back, and the two offices will talk about it again.
We just passed the procedures.
But we passed them,
But we didn't have
yes.
6 votes.
Council's trying to get in.
Right, three
Here.
That's right.
Council's
So we didn't
trying to
get
in.
enough.
No, you
Do
got
we
that.
not have 6 votes?
I couldn't see how many. BJ indicated that it looked like it
I
was
thought
5 to
it was
3
5, is that
because he
correct?
couldn't tell who all
Because I-
voted.
Was-
So you need to have 6
1, 2,
votes
3,
to take to pass.
Because other items on here have to get approved today.
I thought you voted yes.
I voted yes.
Yeah,
I
you
didn't raise my
we didn't see
hand
your
though.
hand.
I'm so sorry.
All right, thank you.
I didn't raise my hand.
Didn't follow procedures.
I'm sorry.
You're out.
Sorry, Becky.
Forgive me.
All right. Now we're on to new business.
So is it clear how many votes?